Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Fresha and I'm interested in learning how to live a happier, healthier, more creative life. And since you clicked on the video, I'm hoping that you and I can learn how to build the lives that we want together. Today we're going to continue the series of Everyone, Everywhere, All at Once, all the women I stopped trying to be in my 20s. I've made 2 videos on this in the past where we covered the pick-me girl, the cool girl, the wellness girly, among others. So I'll leave those videos linked in the description below if you want to check them out. I really love this series, which was inspired by a poem that was sent to me earlier last year. It's by Emery Hall and it reads, "Make peace with all the women you once were. Lay flowers at their feet. Offer them incense and honey and forgiveness. Honor them and give them your silence. Listen. Bless them and let them be. For they are the bones of the temple you sit in now. For they are the rivers of wisdom leading you toward the sea." I've been 1,000 different women. As I said in previous videos, there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from honestly reflecting on the worst versions of yourself from your past, and being able to reflect on those past versions of yourself with grace and a sense of humor. This is a fun series for me to make, and while we're getting close to the end, we're not there yet. So let's keep going down the list of all the women I stopped trying to be in my 20s. And head into the video. So, the next woman I was, with every fiber of my being for a very good portion of my 20s, was the workaholic. I've talked a lot on this channel about my previous experiences with burnout, the lessons I learned from being burnt out, and my experiences getting out of burnout. But I haven't spent as much time talking about how I got into burnout and what those stages of my life looked like. I would say from my early-ish 20s to my very early 30s, there was about an 8-year period where I was just stuck in this vicious cycle. I'd have a couple of years where I'd be in a stable place. Challenging for sure, because your 20s are challenging, but the job that I was working wasn't necessarily driving me to burnout. Then I'd have a couple of years where I was working myself to the bone. Like, there were periods in my late 20s when I was working 14-hour days, 16-hour days. I was managing creative teams of like 10 people, which was large for me at that age and at that point in my career. I was responsive on Slack and on email late at night, early in the morning. I was traveling a lot for work, which, while definitely a privilege and one that I still enjoy to this day, is definitely taxing, especially with how I was doing it. I'd be traveling to a different time zone, working 14-hour days for several days in a row, flying back and then going straight back into working 12-hour days at home with no time for rest. I'd travel for work on weekends and not take off any time during the week to make up for it. Even aside from work travel, I'd often work weekends to get ahead on presentations or to refine the tiniest bit of a creative brief because I wanted every word, every image, every transition to be on point. I was such a perfectionist. Virgo sun, baby. Virgo sun. My sense of work-life balance in these burnout periods was pretty much non-existent. At times, I did feel ascendant because I was climbing up the professional ladder and I was also earning more than I ever had before. But those growth spurts in my career came at a price in my personal life and to my sense of well-being. I was constantly anxious and constantly sick. I just always felt like I was teetering on some edge. And the only way to keep myself from falling off of that emotional precipice was to just keep moving forward. I felt like I needed to sustain that momentum, no matter how unhealthy I knew that it was, because it felt like if I stopped, my lack of balance would become immediately and painfully apparent. Why I did it, who I was trying to impress. I mean, who wasn't I trying to impress? Let's be real. No, I'm just kidding. So this was in the mid to late 2010s, early 2020s, when hustle culture was really being valorized in online culture. It honestly probably still is today. I don't know because I've unsubscribed so hard from that corner of the internet. I took a masochistic sense of pride in how hard I was working myself, in how many hours I worked in a day, in how many days I worked in a row, and how few hours I slept. And you guys know me. I love my sleep, okay? I get less than 7 hours of sleep. I'm a miserable person. I'm the worst version of myself. So you can imagine just like how pleasant of a person I was in this time of my life. I'm not sure that I was trying to impress any specific person per se. One of the things I really appreciate about myself and have become more aware of myself as I've gotten older is that I do have a strong internal drive. I'm sure that there were people at any given point in my career who I was trying to impress, like say my boss or my colleagues, but I will say I don't think that external validation is as driving a force for me as my own internal drive. drive, which is to say my own sense of competitiveness, ambition, and just a simple desire to be good at what I do and to make cool things. But this strong drive is also something that I have to be really aware of, because while it can be exciting and creative and productive and inspiring, it can also become self-destructive if left unchecked, especially when my signals start to get crossed in the frenzy of workaholism. And those initially good driving forces start to get replaced with things like compulsive behaviors or a scarcity mindset, which is something that can happen very easily in a capitalist, high competition, high stakes, high ambition environment, and is something that has happened to me more than once in my young career. Lesson learned. Honestly, at the end of the day, the biggest lesson I've taken away from my past workaholic self is just a greater sense of balance and self-awareness. As with many compulsive behaviors for me, workaholism really is a case of the dose makes the poison. And of course, if you've reached a point where you are already calling yourself a workaholic, like, we've gone too far. Like, we gotta pull it back, okay? It's too much. I've learned that while there's nothing wrong with challenging yourself, an achievement-oriented mentality becomes a problem when it falls out of balance with the rest of your life. Like, I would still consider myself an ambitious and hardworking and career-oriented person for sure. And there was a period a few years ago where a self-assessment like that would have made me feel really uncomfortable. Like, I wouldn't have been able to own that about myself. After one of my last big burnouts, I kind of overcorrected in the other direction. Like, I completely denounced my ambition and like my love of work and everything that comes with it. But that overcorrection put me in kind of a contradictory position where I was forced to deny a very real part of myself, which is creativity and ambition and a desire to make things. It also put me in a position of having to deny a part of myself that really does give me a lot of energy and clarity and focus and inspiration. Since then, I feel like I've found a much healthier expression of that past workaholic version of myself. I do enjoy what I do, and I enjoy testing my creative limits, but I'm much more attuned to my needs now, and I'm just unwilling to ignore those needs. I've also found a sense of identity and self-worth outside of work, in my own creative projects, in having a rich and vibrant community, in taking care of my body and tending to my relationships. And I think that sense of balance and satisfaction in all these other areas of my life makes it a lot easier to resist the urge to hyper-focus on just one corner of my life, as important to me as it may be. I've also learned to reframe periods of rest from work. In the past, I used to see rest as passive or empty space, but it's really the opposite of that. Self-care, taking breaks, taking the time to rest after busy periods, even longer than you technically need, that's not passive, that's a matter of self-respect. Being in tune with your needs and being willing to respect those needs is a sign of maturity, and it's also a sign of confidence. Remember, workaholism is a maladaptation driven by insecurity and a scarcity mindset. I've noticed that as I get older and insecurity just shows up less in my work, so too goes workaholism. I'm able to take breaks not just because I should, but also because I know that I can. And I have a stronger baseline of confidence that I'll be able to pick up wherever I left off whenever I'm ready. Okay, takeaways for you guys. I think this is just kind of like a reminder to check yourself and check in to see how you're feeling. I mean, if you're dealing with workaholism right now, first of all, I think that's a very common experience, and so I hope you're not being super hard on yourself for feeling this way. I hope you find some clarity in this reflection and are reminded that it doesn't always have to be this way. This doesn't have to be who you are. This doesn't have to be how you have to feel all the time in order to be happy, in order to feel secure, in order to develop confidence in whatever it is you're trying to do. I really hope you give yourself enough space for rest, reflection, and peace. All right, next woman that I was for a good portion of my 20s. This is gonna sound a little niche at first. I promise you it's not, okay? Once we get into it. The second woman I tried to be in my 20s is the gallery girl, aka the arbiter of taste. Okay, so I work as a brand and creative director now, but when I was starting my career more than 10 years ago at this point, I actually was working in the world of fine art. I worked at a few small galleries in Los Angeles, working on artist and client relations, business development, and show strategies on the international art fair circuit. I'm not gonna lie, this was really such an incredible start to a creative career. Like, I am so grateful for that experience. Getting to learn from all of those talented gallerists and artists, getting to travel around the world to different art fairs, and just immersing myself in the creative world. However, being a young, fresh-faced, inexperienced, just out of school person in the sometimes snooty world of fine art felt challenging to me, especially because I didn't grow up in an upper class household. Like, I just didn't grow up with that kind of education, where by preschool I could easily know the difference between like a mayonnaise and a monet. You know, 4 years old, I was outside eating worms. I didn't feel like I was educated in the standards of taste and class. And I felt very self-conscious about whether or not I belonged to or could fit in with that well-heeled crowd. I basically had imposter syndrome, and I was always afraid of looking ignorant or dumb. And I responded to that internalized class fear by doing what I do best, baby. Overcompensating by drowning myself in information and setting punishing standards for what I should know. Duh. I dove into the creative world. I read dozens of books. I read old issues of Spike and Art Review and Juxtapose. I watched art films and biopics. I'd spend my weekends at galleries and in museums. And I adopted the annoying and sophomoric habit of mimicking the behavior I saw modeled by elites at shows, in galleries, and in studios. So embarrassing. This resulted in a performance of snobbishness around taste, a hard conviction on silly topics, a compulsion towards classification, always wanting to assign things into categories like good versus bad, high versus low. Like, I really was out here acting like I was the only 22-year-old in Los Angeles in 2013 who had ever heard of Cy Twombly or Agnes Martin. Embarrassing. Like, please, get over yourself. Oh my goodness. The lesson learned. Okay, acting like I was the arbiter of taste was not only super fucking annoying, which it was, if there was any question in your mind about it. It was incredibly annoying. It also drained out a lot of the joy and curiosity that I naturally felt towards art. It took this really organic, living, breathing, dynamic thing and just like turned it into stone, turned it into a system. And I think when this happens, it doesn't just happen in art. It can happen in any creative field that we're interested in. It can happen to music, books, fashion. We all know that one person who has a singular, rigid view of what constitutes good taste in whatever category. Some of us have even been that person, okay? Hey, don't look at me that way. You have been that person too. I can guarantee it. In some area in your life, you've been a gallery girl. You've been a gallery guy. You've been a gallery MB. Like, you have been annoying. Okay? You and me both. We're in this together. We're learning, okay? You can put that judgment away. I often think of that Picasso quote, "Art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life." That's been true throughout my life. I mean, that's why I like that quote. But in that short period of my life when I was an insecure gallery girl, I lost touch with that truth. I let insecurity briefly turn art into commodity. By connecting art to status and class, I allowed myself to forget its more radical nature. And by imposing a rules-based or class-based classification system onto it, I lost sight of its subjectivity, which is what makes art so beautiful and so challenging. And listen, I still firmly believe in the value of thinking critically about art and being willing to criticize art. And again, we're not just talking about art here, we're talking about music, we're talking about fashion, we're talking about movies. I love people who have strong opinions on creative work. I love people who have perspectives and opinions on art that are grounded in a deep sense of history and context. Those are my people. Those are the people I like to hang out with. They're obsessives, they're wonks, they're nerds. They criticize this thing because they love it. I also get easily annoyed by people who think everything is good and like are unwilling to have challenging or contrarian opinions, because I think that tepidness misses a separate but still important facet of creativity, which is to challenge and be challenged. Art and art criticism have always existed in a back and forth dance. And for anyone who's interested in that history, just because like I love it so much, I think it's well chronicled in this book called What Happened to Art Criticism by James Elkin, if you guys want to check it out. But at the end of the day, I'm not an art critic. I'm a person who enjoys art. I'm a person who cares a lot about exploring and developing my own creativity, but I am not an art critic, and I do not have the professional obligation to that kind of intellectual rigor. Nor is anyone asking for that from me. Like, again, get over yourself. That's just a weird standard that my imposter brain was telling me I had to live up to. I also think that insider intellectualization of art can sometimes eclipse more populist experiences of and uses for art. I often think of that Susan Sontag quote, "Rules of taste enforce structures of power." God, I love Susan Sontag. She has so many bangers. Like, we're not worthy. Like, bless. That has been one of the most important ideas in my life, and it's an idea that I return to often. Taste is often dictated by those with class influence, and class is often a result of money. And while money can lower the stakes in experimenting with your taste, it's always good to remember that money doesn't equal taste. Say it again for the people in the back. Money doesn't always equal taste. Taste isn't something that's just developed through the act of purchasing things that you like. It can, and I would argue should, be developed by practice, which is to say reading, watching movies, going to museums, listening to new types of music or old types of music, drawing, painting, you name it. The world is yours, baby. It's there for the taking. In fact, I actually believe that reducing your taste to a commercial behavior, again, just like shopping, buying things, can often take like a subjective, multifaceted experience of developing your taste, and I think can compress it into something that's one-dimensional. Today, I find myself a lot more open and pluralistic in my ideas of taste, and subsequently in my relationship to things like art, music, books, movies, fashion. This is honestly a way more fun, and I believe a more creative relationship to have with these things. I see taste as a practice rather than as an inherent quality. And like I said, I do still find a lot of inspiration in things like historical deep dives or understanding this like canons and structure, all things that are traditionally associated with the idea of taste. I'm just not so priggish about it now. I used to work with this older woman who was an artist who would always tell me, it's important to know what the rules are so that in your own work, you can be intentional with the ones that you break, which I think is a helpful framework when you're thinking about balancing the structure or canon of a creative field against your subjective experience of it. All right, takeaways for the audience. I hope this wasn't as niche as it comes off. I was like reading the script and I was like, I really hope this isn't boring for everyone. But I hope it made sense. And I think that, again, we've all known this people. We all likely have been these people. I think this is very common online in conversations about creativity, taste, art. I think, maybe a very common example of this that I see is like the capsule wardrobe, right? And people are like, if you have good taste or you want to have good style, this is what this looks like. It's like wearing only neutrals works if you only like wearing neutrals. But like that, or another example where it's like, what are the 100 best albums ever? It's like, yeah, you should know those because it's nice to have the context of other people's opinions, especially like expert opinions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are developing your taste. Having the perfect capsule wardrobe or having the perfect collection of records or the perfect creative hobbies, that doesn't mean that you're developing your taste, because taste is personal. Taste imparts a sense of value and a sense of world building that is personal to you. And so just because you have these things doesn't necessarily mean that you have good taste, and it doesn't mean that you'll feel satisfied by them. So we spent a lot of time talking about like the deeper motivations of this gallery girl, but to go back to the behavior of her, if you're someone who's feeling constrained by your own insecurity and it's manifesting in things like judgment or dismissiveness, first of all, welcome to the club. Happens to the best of us, okay? Whomst amongst us? Whom amongst us? Whomst amongst us? I think it's a common reaction to insecurity. People express their insecurity in different ways in different parts of their lives. And I think for anyone who works in a creative field or is trying to be more creative, judgments around taste are a very common vehicle for communicating our insecurity within this part of our life that feels very important and dear to us. However, if you notice this behavior in yourself, I think it is helpful for you to question, does this behavior make you feel more creative? Does it make you feel more connected to art? Does it instill in you a healthy, flexible form of confidence or a more brittle sense of superiority? Because those are different things. Remember that. And if it's the latter, we gotta go back to the drawing board, okay? Because that's not gonna make you happy, and it's not gonna make you feel good, and it's not gonna make your work better. There's that old saying, something like, I'm gonna just read it straight off the computer. Envy is the only one of the 7 deadly sins that doesn't give even momentary pleasure to the sinner. Banger! And while this gallery girl isn't envious per se, I do think she's cut from a similar insecure cloth as an envious person. Which is to say, actually acting on this insecurity in this period of my life, instead of making me feel secure or feel accepted or smart or empowered, it actually made my world feel a lot smaller, and it drained a lot of joy and curiosity out of my life. As a general rule, if a behavior or a belief system or a relationship makes your world feel smaller, it probably isn't going to be a good fit in the long term. When I was younger, I saw confidence in a very shallow, one-dimensional way, as something that was authoritative and clear-cut. But now that I'm older, I see real confidence as being open, flexible, pluralistic, good-humored, and still resilient. I know I've been throwing quotes out left and right, but hey, it's a new year. We're being bombarded by quotes. I'm on a roll. Here's a final one from Michelle Williams. Mother, the Queen. I want to be like water. I want to slip through fingers, but hold up a ship. I love that quote so much. I did a little doodle of it in college, and I've had it hung on the wall of every apartment I've lived in since. It's a good reminder for me that that's what real confidence and authority and influence and taste should look like. Not a stone wall, but an ocean. Something with the ability to shift in form, change its mind, but still possess the strength and resilience to support something substantial when the time calls for it. All right, to bring it back to the poem that inspired this all, make peace with all the women you once were. Lay flowers at their feet. Offer them incense and honey and forgiveness. Honor them and give them your silence. Listen. Bless them and let them be. For they are the bones of the temple you sit in now. For they are the rivers of wisdom leading you toward the sea. I've been 1,000 different women. All right, that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. And again, I would love to hear from all of you. What is a past version of yourself that you are grateful to have learned from and are also grateful to have said goodbye to? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!